Hello, I'm Mark Crutcher, President of Life Dynamics, and I want to welcome you to LifeTalk for October 1999. Zentra, why don't you and Linda tell the nice folks what we're going to be seeing today?
Well, later we're going to be talking about the home abortion kit, or as it may more accurately be described, abortions on the party plan. Believe me, you have no idea just how whacked out our opponents can be until you've seen this deal. Also in this month's program, we'll be giving you up-to-the-moment information about our campaign to expose the marketing of baby parts from children killed during abortions.
Right, Zentra. We're also going to be joined by Jill Stanek, who is a nurse at Christ Hospital in Chicago. If you haven't heard this story yet, you're in for a real shock. Then we're going to be giving you some new information about late-term abortions and babies who are born alive during them.
Well, I think we've got another great show planned. But first, we're going to go to Alan Ackles in the news. Alan?
All right, Mark, thank you very much. In Fort Myers, Florida, Sheriff John McDougal has drawn criticism from pro-abortion, feminist, and pro-homosexual groups for a website in which he stated that America has, quote, caved into the wishes of the depraved and have allowed them to systematically exclude God from our midst, unquote. McDougal told the Fort Myers News Press that he posted this notice on the Lee County Sheriff's Office website because of his concerns that Planned Parenthood, politicians, liberal judges, pornography, and one-world government radicals are causing the moral collapse of the nation. The Florida chapter of the ACLU was quick to criticize Sheriff McDougal, calling his statements distressing. In England, a 33-year-old woman who had been in a coma for 6 months gave birth to a son. Debbie Johnson was diagnosed with meningitis in January and placed in a drug-induced coma to increase the oxygen flow to her brain. Well, after discovering that she was pregnant, doctors considered abortion. However, none were willing to perform the procedure without the woman's consent. When the child was delivered through cesarean section, Ms. Johnson astounded doctors by responding to the newborn being laid on her chest. Although she eventually recovered to the point of being removed from life support, she died of a heart attack 6 weeks later. Her husband was quoted as saying, "She kept her body alive for the sake of the baby. After he was born, she just couldn't carry on." After pleading guilty to filling a false statement with the health department, New Jersey abortion clinic owner Alan Weiselberg avoided a prison sentence by agreeing to pay $30,000 in fines and performing 150 hours of community service. He was also placed on probation for 3 years and barred from working in medical services. The charges stem from Weiselberg's claim that disposable instruments were not reused in abortions performed at his medical care center in Woodbridge, New Jersey. Although Weiselberg also pleaded guilty to a conspiracy charge on behalf of his company, U.S. District Judge Mary L. Cooper waived any fine after determining that the company was insolvent and without income. In Ohio, 16-year-old Sean Steele confessed to killing his 15-year-old girlfriend because she refused his demand that she get an abortion. Barbara Watkins, who was 22 weeks pregnant at the time of her death, was found strangled in a wooded area near Columbus. Now, according to one of Watkins' friends, Steele had offered her money for an abortion because he didn't want his family to find out about her pregnancy. Watkins' sister also claimed that her parents knew about the pregnancy and were supportive of her carrying the child to term. Franklin County prosecutor Ron O'Brien said he plans to charge Steele with 2 counts of aggravated murder, 1 for the death of Watkins and 1 for the death of her unborn child. O'Brien explained that the prosecutor's office will use a 3-year-old law that makes it a crime to kill or assault a fetus at any stage of development. They will also request that Steele be tried as an adult. Lawmakers in the nation's capital have introduced legislation that would allocate $85 million annually to pay for crisis pregnancy centers, maternity homes, and adoption agencies. The grants would not be available to organizations that perform or refer women for abortions. Now, under the plan introduced by Senator Rick Santorum and Representatives Mary Bono, Joe Pitts, and Ann Northrup, poorer women would be given first priority. According to the bill's sponsor, the legislation is needed to provide alternatives to existing government family planning programs that focus on abortion. Senator Santorum said that no woman should ever feel like abortion is her only option. Gloria Felt, president of Planned Parenthood, issued a statement calling the proposed legislation cynical and misguided. In late September, a federal appeals court ruled that state laws in Arkansas, Iowa, and Nebraska banning partial birth abortions are unconstitutional. The court said the ban would place an undue burden on women seeking abortions because its language could also prohibit the more common forms of abortion. The ruling, which is only appealable to the U.S. Supreme Court, is particularly important because the Iowa and Nebraska laws containing language virtually identical to that in the partial birth abortion ban now pending in Congress. And in a related story, Missouri's partial birth ban was also blocked by a federal court until a trial could be held on its constitutionality. Well, that court action is currently scheduled for March of next year. And finally, in Canada, information obtained through a Freedom of Information request shows that in one recent year, the federal government there spent almost $56 million to pay for abortions under their system of socialized medicine. It was also revealed that during the last 5 years, Canadian residents have been paying the rent on notorious abortionist Henry Morgenthaler's Toronto death camp. According to the report, taxpayers have already shelled out more than $2.6 million and will pay in excess of $5 million before the lease expires. These same government documents show that Morgenthaler also receives $450,000 for security, $1.5 million for operating expenses, and $120 for each child that he kills. Well, that's LifeTalk News for October 1999. Mark, back to you.
Thank you, Alan. That was a great job. Before we go any further, I want to thank you guys who've called in and expressed some concerns about the safety of all of us here at Life Dynamics because of the nature of the stuff that we're putting out these days and our security. We've even had some donations made from people that have...
people have even called in asking us to please get a security guard to walk us from our cars to the building.
Right. Well, that may be going a little bit too far.
I think so.
But we have had some of you guys send in donations just for... and earmarked it for security, and we have increased security at Life Dynamics. We are doing the best we can to protect our people, to protect our facility, and to protect the material that we've gathered up. But be assured, we're not going to be frightened off the pond. We're going to continue with this project, whatever else happens. So, again, thank you for your concerns. I think you had some information about Steve Forbes.
Yeah, one of the things that's been in the news lately is the fact that Steve Forbes and the Forbes family has withdrawn financial support from Princeton University. And the reason for that is that Princeton hired as professor of bioethics in their Center for Human Values, Peter Singer. And this guy is pretty incredible as far as what he's said in the past. He has written in support of euthanasia for disabled infants. He has said that eating fish is a greater moral wrong than killing an infant, and he's also equated pigs with human beings. And this guy is the new professor of bioethics in the Center for Human Values.
Professor. He's there to stay.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
For bioethics. Think about that. This is it'd be like
bio
Adolf Hitler
lack
going to be
of ethics.
If they found Adolf Hitler alive today, making him your tenured professor of bioethics.
Right.
You know, it's astonishing.
Right.
And I mean, this guy openly writes. He has a book out where he says that parents should be allowed a certain grace period after the birth of a child to determine whether that child is a person or not. And if it's not, then they should be allowed to destroy the child. It's astonishing.
Now, the good thing there is not only has Steve Forbes removed his funding from the university, but he is on the board of trustees, and he'll be staying on the board of trustees to help try to bring about change.
Right, and have a voice. I think that's a very smart thing to do, and he's to be commended for withdrawing that financial support, because as we've seen so many times, that is where people pay attention, is when you withdraw their finances.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of protests. Not only pro-lifers and also disabled people, and that is very understandable that they would be very offended by Singer's views. Speaking of protests, I have some information here from Canada. The Centers for Bioethical Reform, which is Greg Cunningham's group out of California, were setting up their genocide awareness project at the University of British Columbia, where they have large posters of aborted babies and then compare that situation in this country today and in Canada today to black lynching victims and also Nazi Holocaust victims. They had plans to go and set up that display at the University of British Columbia, and the administrators of that campus became completely unreasonable and eventually withdrew their permission for the CBR to even set up there. They were demanding $26,000 a day originally.
The university was.
The university
From
was.
the pro-lifers?
From the pro-lifers, right, for security. Why do they need this security? Because the pro-abort students
Threatened
were
them.
threatening to riot.
Right.
And they were going to make the pro-lifers responsible for the pro-aborts' irresponsible, unruly behavior. It
And
was
and illegal.
Illegal, right.
Right.
It was completely ridiculous arrangement. CBR was even trying to be accommodating, offered to reduce the size of their display to make room for the pro-abortion students with a sufficient buffer zone between them, but the university wouldn't even agree to that.
Well, so this is a new standard now on university campuses, which I thought were basically for tolerance and for expression of ideas.
Right.
And what happened to that theory?
Long gone.
I mean, but we've established a new principle now that the pro-aborts can use, which is if the pro-lifers are going to come in and talk about the pro-life viewpoint on a college campus, then you threaten to riot and to commit illegal acts. We'll go to the pro-lifers, make them put up a large enough bond that they won't be able to do it and they'll have to withdraw. So we can hold the pro-lifers responsible for the activities that the pro-aborts are threatening to do.
That's right, and that's a time-honored liberal rule, it seems like. No
Right.
matter what
They're
happens,
the
let's
only
blame
ones
the
allowed to
pro-lifers.
picket, to burn books, to
Right.
Yeah.
create
Censor.
any sort of public
Because
display.
if they do it, they're raising awareness. If
Right.
we're doing
If we
it,
do
it's
we're-
a hate crime.
Right, and
it's a
we're
hate
being
crime. That's right.
oppressors.
You know, we also had some information about a story we covered last month with this Ben Folds 5 alternative rock group or whatever.
Yeah, we had a story, and we actually read the lyrics from one of their songs called Brick, and it seemed to suggest that it was about abortion. And sure enough, here's a story, an interview with the group, and it says that Ben Folds, who is the leader of the group, skewers peers who make irony an art form, different things about other songs. But then it talks about Brick, and it says it's a dead serious chronicle of a relationship disintegrating after an abortion. And you know, I've looked at
what we
other
said.
videos and songs since then, and I've seen that abortion theme. I mean, it is really, really pervasive in pop culture and
Right.
songs.
It
like
is-
we were saying last month, it's almost everyone in this country has been touched by it in one way or another, and art's music's gonna express your personal experiences. So.
They obviously, whoever wrote those lyrics, as we talked about last month, had to have personal firsthand experience of this. And it was eerie to me to see this actually come out in a news story confirming just what we have
What
been
we
talking
had said.
about, you know, about this obscure group that, you know, most people have never heard about. But it's not only the obscure groups that do it. I mean, we brought up a lot of examples last month of how this is going on. You know, one of the things that I thought was interesting over the last few weeks or last month or so is in this story about the shootings at Wedgwood Baptist Church in Fort Worth. You know, we had a story a couple of months ago about how Janet Reno and Bill Clinton have turned the U.S. Justice Department into a private police force for the abortion industry. The abortion industry basically pulls the strings clearly at the Justice Department on anything related to abortion. The interesting thing here is, why don't we have federal marshals now at all the Baptist churches seeing that this kind of religious bigotry, Christian bigotry,
Right.
doesn't reappear?
Reno didn't even have a press conference.
Right, no press conference, no saying we got to get to the bottom of this, why are...
No investigation of co-conspirators
Right.
on a major national level.
And this man goes through the church shooting people, railing and cursing about Christians. And had this been happening any other environment, we'd had a federal investigation,
And a
I
hate
promise
crime.
you. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, we're going to be coming back in a few moments, and we're going to be talking about party plan abortions.
It's a fact. The most frequently read part of any newspaper is the editorial page. It's also a fact that Life Dynamics can provide you with more than 400 pro-life letters to the editor that you can copy, combine, and customize to literally dominate the abortion debate in your local newspaper. Remember, more revolutions have been won with printing presses than with guns. And this book is guaranteed to give you the firepower you need to duke it out with the most aggressive abortion defenders in your area and win. To get your copy of Letters to the Editor, send just $10 to the address on the screen. For MasterCard and Visa customers, you may call toll-free 1-800-401-6494. Call today. Once again, that toll-free number is 1-800-401-6494.
Well, we're back, and we've got an interesting subject to talk to you about here. You know, you almost have to laugh because this is so
Yeah.
incredible. It's so outrageous. Many years ago, I think even before we started Life Dynamics, even I think we had this right from the beginning. We had the information on the abortion industry's home abortion kit, and they put out a lot of printed material. We're not going to show you on camera. Believe me,
We
you don't
can't.
want to see it. But it's pretty outrageous, and They try to get women to stay out of gynecologist office because they think that gynecologists are all males and they're trying to control women's bodies. But the main thing here is to do home abortions. And we've all, unfortunately, watched the video, and it's pretty incredible.
It's just the most laughable thing you'd ever see. They get these women together.
Well, wait a minute. It's laughable if you ignore the fact that a baby's dying.
Right.
It's laughable from what these people are advocating.
It's watching the video and watching how they propose to do it, I guess, and their whole mentality about it is the laughable part.
Right.
Once you just recognize that what they're talking about is morally abhorrent in the first place.
Right.
What they suggest you do is you get a group of women together in a room, about 4 or 5 women, and you sit around and you give each other cervical examinations. They provide you with inexpensive plastic speculums and mirrors, of course, and flashlights, right? And they have on the video they have this moderator who's explaining to them everything to do and what to look for, and she mentions that you and your friends can help look to see if you notice anything unusual.
Like,
women
are...
How the heck are you supposed to know if something's unusual or not? And they give you little pointers, but really, how are you going to be able to look at a cervix and know, oh, it's cancerous? We've got to get you into...
Of course you don't know that.
Chemotherapy or whatever.
And, of course, this girl who's doing this thing is... shall we say, scantily clad.
Well, yeah.
Or she's nude from the waist down.
On this video, they show them doing the examination on her, so you're seeing it all.
Well, she's doing it on herself.
Exactly. Yeah, she's doing it on herself, and then the other participants are sitting there.
They get their flashlight.
Taking a look.
I'm sure so this will all be safe for women, that they also show in the video how to make your living room that you're having this meeting in completely sterile.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is a very sterile procedure.
In full detail, right.
But they do seem to suggest that you wear socks. We've noticed, have you ever noticed that?
You always have to bring the socks. I'm not sure what...
It's really outrageous.
But then the mascot.
But beyond the cervical self-exams, they do show how to... They show a homemade menstrual extraction kit, which, if you're pregnant at the time you're doing this, would cause an abortion.
Right.
Or perforated uterus, perhaps.
Right, or a severely infected uterus, since, once again, they don't have the sterile techniques.
Introducing an unsterile thing.
Right, but they show how to make this kit.
It's basically a mason jar.
Well, that's what they say, a mason jar, some aquarium tubing.
A horse syringe to work up as a pump.
A vacuum.
And they basically just, and no dilation
Right.
procedure. They just basically, push the hose up into the woman's cervix and start pumping.
And this is a pro-woman thing to do. I mean, these are people who claim that they are so pro-woman and we have to have women have all of these options, and they do garbage like this.
And the question is, why do they need this?
Well, one of the stories that I have here, a quote by one of these women that's involved, says that they needed to promote this book and video in case the other shoe falls and we lose abortion rights in this country. What shoe, pray tell, has fallen in this country?
So that there might be a second one to fall.
I mean, we can kill children all the way up to the moment of birth,
Right.
and she's saying the other shoe falling.
Right.
And listen to the mentality here, so that we'll be prepared in case the other shoe falls and she's saying, and in case abortion becomes illegal. What they're saying is, well, if you won't let me have legal abortions, then by golly, I'll just go out and get one myself and have an illegal one.
It's almost like this, I'm going to hold my breath till I turn blue.
Right, the adult version,
If you don't give me what I want.
It's frankly a very childish approach, and it's very interesting, too, that they're always so critical of pro-lifers who break the law to basically get what they want, which is to save a baby's life, and how dangerous and lawless the pro-lifers are. But their whole argument is based around the idea that we'll just go out and break the law if you don't write the law the way we want it to be done.
Yeah. Something else that's very interesting about this deal is, we laugh about it, because it is, you laugh to keep from crying about how pathetic these people are. But one of the things that's interesting on here is, or I've always found it interesting the times I've had to watch this, they are so willing to lie to their own people, because this video is an internal document. They never meant for us to have it, or to have all their printed materials or any of the other junk, but it's an internal document. They're talking to their own people, and the things they're telling, they're just lying through their teeth. In here, this woman says that she's given the standard political garbage that they always spew. And she sits there and has the Sussman on there, the attorney, and one of the attorneys in Roe, and they're saying, now what Roe didn't do, it did not make abortion on demand legal. You can get an abortion in the first trimester for basically any reason if you want to. There's a few reasons you can get one in the second trimester, and abortions are not permitted. That's a quote. Abortions are not permitted in the third trimester.
That's nonsense.
These
Which is a complete
people
lie.
are lying
Right.
through their teeth. And it's one thing, I mean, you understand I'm lying through the teeth. We've all been down that trail. When they're out in public and they're trying to make a public, point, they're trying to rally support for their cause. But they're lying to their own
Right.
people. And I don't understand why pro-abortion women aren't at least upset about that part of it. And throughout this thing, to suggest that this thing is somehow going to profit women to have these self-help groups, and you mentioned in the opening they're whacked out. They are whacked out. I mean, they're talking about you should go to your pastor,
and ask him about setting up a self-help group. That it could be a spin-off from a woman's Bible study.
Right.
Can you imagine? You get together with your female friends from church and say, "Hey, by the way, why don't you come over to my house after church today and we'll have a little cervical self-exam party."
And you thought
Right.
it was tough to get 10 people to come to your house for a Tupperware party.
And just come over and take off your clothes. And do you have your own speculum? If you don't, we'll loan you one or
Right.
something. It's
And
it's
it's something
astonishing.
just to put off any criticisms. The video we're talking about and the information we're talking about was introduced. At least the video was in the mid '80s or so, but they're promoting it to this very day.
Oh, it's more than that. It goes back into the 70s.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, but you have a copy.
We looked up their website, and that particular video I think is put out by the Feminist Women's Health Centers,
Right,
right?
Federation of Feminist Women's, yeah.
Right.
Right.
And they have on their webpage, they are currently promoting a book, a woman's book of choices that talks about how to. That it's the only place where the menstrual extraction is explained in detail, complete with a list of components for the easy to make Del M. I guess that's the model
kit.
device.
That's the kit. See, they were putting them out. They were putting out the kits themselves. They were selling kits, but the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, came down on them. So I know you can't do that.
So they just tell them where
So
to get
now
the
you have
parts.
to go to the pet store and get your own aquarium tubing.
Well, yeah, you got to go get your own aquarium tubing and it's so
Your
funny.
own syringe.
Your own mason jar and your own horse syringe and your aquarium tubing, and get all your friends.
That's going to be several different trips to several different stores.
And when we had someone call their office to ask about all this, they specifically even recommended this book. So
Right.
it's all still a very current issue.
And
even
they
if
take
they're
it very
not
seriously.
producing
Oh,
the
it's a very
equipment
serious
themselves.
thing. And I don't for a minute suggest that this thing has really caught on. I don't think there are women's self-help groups all over the United States.
No.
I've never been approached about one. At least.
Well, you probably won't be.
Maybe my friends know better than to go there.
Maybe
with
you
me.
travel in different circles than
Yeah,
people
well,
who.
that's true.
But just the idea that they would push this is the outrageous part of it. And
something we touched on earlier when I said, can they identify cancer by doing this? That's a real question, though. If they're trying to keep these women out of these gynecologists' offices,
well, they have a book by that title,
Right.
How to Stay Out of the Gynecologist's Office.
and try to treat themselves and help themselves. What do you do when you have a major problem?
Right.
At some point, you have to deal with the male-dominated medical community if you want to be around for another few years.
Well, I mean, when
Yeah.
they say, place the speculum and get your flashlight and start looking around and have your friends try to spot anything unusual, but they don't tell you what unusual means. Well, I mean, this whole thing is unusual. I mean, it's not.
Well, and they're such hypocrites because I guarantee you if somebody was doing the same thing in a developing third world nation, they would use it as proof that we needed to go in with our federal tax dollars
Right.
and give them assistance so that these women can have so-called safe and legal abortions, whereas they're teaching people how to do unsafe
Absolutely.
abortions.
It is pretty outrageous. Well, we're going to be back in a moment, and we're going to have a very special guest. I want to make you aware of a couple of pieces of legislation that are floating around the United States right now that on the surface don't have anything to do with abortion, but are very critical in reality. First, there are diabolical proposals now to mandate that all adoptions must be open adoptions. They're even going to the point of saying, we're going to go back and open up closed adoption records for the past 25 or 30 years. This is extraordinarily dangerous, and it's part of a calculated effort by people who profit from abortion and who market abortion to make young girls see that there is no option to them other than abortion. After all, if adoption records are required to be open, they can say to this young lady, look, darling, you can get a secret abortion, but you can't get a secret adoption. So if you want to keep this hidden for the rest of your life, you better go ahead and kill your baby rather than place it for adoption. These people are unbelievably cynical. You have to understand how diabolical and how evil the people are that we're up against. They will do this very sort of thing. When you go out and you look at who the sponsors of this legislation are, who the people that are pushing it are, you find the usual suspects that we always see harking on abortion. These people cannot be allowed to destroy one of the legitimate options to abortion. The second thing you need to be aware of is something called tort reform. Right now, primarily conservative Republicans are pushing this thing because they say there's all these outrageous claims that juries are making to people who suffer very minimal damage or no damage at all. Very often they'll use things like the situation where the woman was burned after pouring hot coffee on her at a McDonald's. A jury awarded her millions. What they don't tell you is that an appellate court eliminated most of that award. And that's generally what happens in these situations. Why do we care whether there's tort reform or not? It's very simple. The group that will profit the most from tort reform in America is the abortion industry. Abortion industry representatives are hot on tort reform because it is abortionists who will then be insulated from the harm that they do to women in these abortion clinics. And we have had firsthand experience with this right here at Life Dynamics. As you know, we produce a tape called Christie's Choice about a young lady in Pueblo, Colorado, who was left in a permanent vegetative state following her abortion. Because tort reform had already been passed in the state of Colorado, her parents were only able to get 5% of the amount in court that they proved it would take to raise Christy to the age of 55. This is what's going to happen if we don't stop these reforms of the nation's tort system. We will eliminate the ability for the average person to go into court and receive justice. Well, we're back, and we are joined by a very special guest coming here from Illinois to Texas. I understand it's your first trip to Texas?
Yes.
That's great. Well, that must be a real thrill for you there.
Barbecue is very good.
right. Our guest here is Jill Stanek, and she's a nurse at Christ Hospital in Chicago, and she's come forward with some revelations that are pretty astonishing. You have a lot of people in the pro-life movement who claim that, they'll go to bat for the pro-life movement, but very few people are willing to actually risk anything in their personal lives. But Jill is such a person, and welcome to LifeTalk.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us what your story is, what you saw at Christ Hospital?
All right. Well, I'm a nurse at Christ Hospital. I've been there for 6 years, have been in labor and delivery for 4 years. Came to Christ Hospital because it was a Christian hospital and didn't think I had to worry about any ethical issues. Never asked if we committed abortions. When I transferred to labor and delivery, I never asked, just assumed that we didn't. And about a year after I was on the floor, I came in to report one night and heard a report that we were committing an abortion on a woman who had a Downs baby. And this was the first that I'd heard of it. Did a little checking and found out that we do them somewhere between 10 and 26 times a year for babies with handicaps. Some of these babies have handicaps that are lethal. They won't live outside the womb, but some of them don't. Some of them have handicaps such as already mentioned Downs, spina bifida, cystic fibrosis, and we will abort them in the second trimester. This news was horrifying enough, but what made it worse was the manner in which we abort. And the way that we abort results oftentimes in the babies being born alive. We will abort anywhere from 17 to 24 weeks. They insert a medication into the woman, which causes her cervix to open up early. And the cervix is the bottom part of the uterus, which is supposed to stay closed until it's time to deliver, will cause this cervix to open up. And these babies are so small that essentially they fall out of the uterus, and that is how it comes to be that these babies are born alive.
They were counting on the labor itself causing the death of the child?
I don't think they were counting on it either way, no. That they knew that sometimes these babies would be born dead because of the abnormalities they had, but they expected that sometimes that they would be born alive.
And the mothers actually go through the labor process to deliver
Sometimes they'll feel cramping and bleeding. Sometimes they won't actually have much of a labor process, but just bleeding, and then they'll feel something and call the nurse in, and the baby will deliver.
What happens to the babies that are born alive?
They are not given any medical care. They are given what the hospital calls comfort care, which is wrapping the baby in a blanket, offering the baby to the parents to hold, which most times they don't, and then it is left to a nurse or support staff on the floor to hold until the baby dies. And the baby can live anywhere from a few minutes to as long as 6 to 7 hours. They've lived almost a whole shift.
Have you personally seen this?
Yes, I've actually held a Downs baby. Was a little boy about 21, 22 weeks. He lived for 45 minutes. And to keep making the story worse, if a support staff on the floor doesn't have time to hold the baby, then the baby is taken to our soiled utility room and left to die.
Just a linen closet, or?
It's soiled utility room where our soiled linens go and where our instruments go.
Why don't they at least just, I don't know, like set it on a table or set it in the nursery rather than sticking it over in the closet?
They used to, within the last 5 years, they've quit taking the babies to the nursery.
Okay.
I understand that there was complaint in the nursery as to the amount of paperwork that was left to them, but I think that it has more to do with wanting to keep what's going on inside the department and not.
Fewer people know about it, though, less
Right.
Yeah,
PR
and I
problems you have.
That would be my question, is what was the attitude of the other nurses and the other medical staff toward this practice?
It's been going on for several years, I guess, and it is one of those things where I can see now how the Holocaust could have snuck up on people, that, you know, one little thing happens that's not so bad, you'll abort a baby that couldn't live with no brain. Then, you know, another step happens and you abort a baby that's a little less handicapped, and then the baby is born and I don't have time to hold the baby, and so I have to put it somewhere. Let me put it in here for a few minutes. And all of a sudden you've got this thing happening that when you're in the middle of it, you may not see how bad it is until you step on the outside or draw attention to it. So,
Are there other people there that are as upset about it as you are?
there are, in our hospital, you don't have to take an aborting patient if you don't want to, but the implication is still there when a baby is born alive for you to take, you know, you feel compelled to take care of the baby.
Right. But I mean, are there other hospital staff that are expressing the outrage about this going on like you are? Are you just kind of out there twisting in the wind by yourself, or?
Publicly, I am. Privately now, the Department of Public Health has gotten involved. Concerned Women for America filed a complaint with the Illinois Attorney General saying that this is infanticide, and they're looking into it. And now privately, nurses have come forward to the Department of Public Health and told them stories that are even more horrific than what I could possibly tell, things that they've seen that are just far worse. So there are people coming forward, if not in front of the public eye, privately.
Well, you know, when we started first talking about this issue of babies being born alive following abortions, I mean, people are thinking we're nuts. We must be, you know, staying out in the Texas sun too long or something. But now you have this situation in Calgary,
right? Same thing.
Canada, same exact deal. They're openly admitting, yes, we do what they call genetic terminations.
Right.
And then we've had this situation rear its ugly head a couple times in Ohio lately. We hear all kinds of rumors of it happening in a lot of other places. Now you're coming forward, and I suspect it can't be that it's only happening in these few little isolated instances.
No, already in Chicago, 2 other hospitals have confessed to committing this type of abortion in the last 2 weeks: Rush Presbyterian, St. Luke's, and Lutheran General.
And it only stands to reason that, you know, 26 some odd go on a year just at your hospital. They couldn't have been some of the only ones thinking about
Right.
it. It seems like it would be a widespread
I don't think the idea was
practice.
original, no.
Has the hospital's legal department ever talked to you about this? Because this is technically, even in our country where you have abortion on demand right up to the moment of birth, this is technically a murder, because once this baby emerges alive from the birth canal, it is then a person for purposes of the law. Has their legal department at the hospital talked to you people that are in this situation, and told you what your legal exposure may be?
The legal of the department of the hospital doesn't want to talk to us, but the legal people in the Chicago area and nationwide, AUL, are looking at this, scrutinizing it, trying to find a law that will fit, and are looking at it very closely. In the meantime, the hospital is maintaining its stance, I think, to protect itself because it weakens its case now if it decides to stop them.
If they stop doing it, they're saying, oh, we shouldn't have been doing it all
Right,
along.
right.
So that puts them in a legal, kind of a quagmire there.
Right.
The interesting thing here, and it's like our fetal tissue deal, and I want to talk to you about that in a moment about how we think there's a relationship here. But people think, well, this is just an outrageous thing, even if they're somewhat marginally pro-choice or whatever, and how did we get in this situation? These things are not unpredictable. I said this before about the fetal tissue. I said it in previous shows about the fetal tissue marketing. These are not unpredictable things. These are very inevitable, very predictable. When you have a Supreme Court that comes out and says that we can kill these babies on demand whenever we want to, right up to the moment of birth, certain things are inevitable from that, and this is one of them.
Right.
The question becomes, from a strictly philosophical point, what difference does it make if the baby's killed outside the womb, allowed to die outside the womb, or ripped apart with a D&E, for example, inside the womb? Our position to pro-lifers, see, I don't think it ought to be pro-lifers who are so horrified about this. If you're truly pro-life, it's no different to take that baby out of the womb and put it in a closet and let it die in 4 hours than it is to rip it apart inside the womb. Our view is that they shouldn't be killed no matter where they are. Isn't that
No, I
correct?
think you're right. I think that this is not anything that makes the pro-life position any stronger, but it makes the pro-choice position weaker.
Absolutely.
It makes the people that are pro-choice a little more squirmy and a little less able to explain away that these are okay.
And that shows a real hypocrisy there. Because if you're pro-choice marginally, or to whatever degree you're pro-choice, and then you're horrified about this thing or the stuff that we've been releasing, and we have had a lot of pro-choice people calling us and say, I'm pro-choice, I disagree with you guys on abortion, but what you're revealing here is horrific if it's really happening. And my attitude toward them is you're very hypocritical.
What if there's nothing wrong with abortion? What's so bad about it?
What's wrong with this?
And what made the abortion that was done right before birth so bad then?
Right.
But you know what the difference is? You know what the difference is? They can see these babies.
Right.
They can visualize in their mind a helpless baby being taken out, put in a closet, and everybody said, just leave him alone, he'll die in a little bit. Right. Which is the thing that we consistently hear. They can visualize that in their mind, and that makes them uncomfortable. And, it's the old thing, if wombs had windows, every abortionist in the country would be in a federal penitentiary, which is clearly, in our view, where they should be.
The case anyway. Yeah.
But so I don't think that pro-lifers ought to be all that horrified by this, because what you're really talking about here is location. Is the baby inside the womb going to be slaughtered, or the baby outside the womb? And to us, it shouldn't make any difference. But I think it's a good, I hate to use the word tool, but in effect, a learning tool to show to those marginally pro-choice people out there how hypocritical they are, to not be concerned if you take this identical baby and rip its arms and legs off and crush its skull inside the womb. That's okay with you. But take that baby and place it in a closet and let it just kind of die of natural causes, so to speak. Then all of a sudden you're all horrified. Why?
Even when the baby is delivered, it's very easy for us to say if this baby was delivered and it was stuck in a bucket of water to kill it, that is murder.
Right.
But sticking it in a closet is not quite murder, it's
Right.
covert, is
Even though the effect is
just
the
neglect.
same, the intent is
Right.
the same.
Well,
We didn't really do
it's
it.
like sins of omission versus sins of commission. In one case, you have a sin of commission. We killed this baby. In one, we have a sin of omission. We allowed this baby to die
But
without raising a finger.
it certainly seems to me like there are laws on the books already about this sort of thing as just a negligent homicide or a child abuse regulation somewhere that would cover this.
There are baby doe laws in effect, but the difference is that these babies are non-viable. They make very sure that when they abort these babies that they couldn't live even if they were healthy outside the womb.
But you see, this whole thing of viability is something that I think we need to get way beyond, because a baby, if you think about the technology that exists today,
Right.
viability keeps getting changed,
That's
not
right.
by the difference in the baby, but by the difference in our technology.
Technology,
So this is a very artificial and fluid point. But the real fact here is that babies are viable from the moment of conception. And if that
left
were not
alone.
true,
Right.
If that were not true, in vitro fertilization would not be possible. We have in vitro fertilization outside the mother at the moment of conception, then we put the baby into the mother because we can't, as humans, yet create the technology to make this baby survive. But clearly, that baby is viable, or it would not live between the time you create it in the petri dish or whatever, and then you implant it into the woman's body.
It's just the circumstances by
Right.
which it is viable
Right.
that change it.
Now, we don't have just a minute here or so left, but one of the things that we can speculate about, we're in Broil, as you know, in this big fetal tissue
Right.
marketing thing, and we're at the very beginnings of this campaign, believe me.
And a lot of it is happening in Illinois, too.
Right,
So this
exactly.
is great.
I think, and you and I have talked about this, we have nothing in the world to prove that this has a connection to fetal tissue marketing, but I believe it does. Because if we know, or we now believe, that they created the partial birth abortion procedure as a way to get better tissue. A D&E or a saline or a urea or a ditch abortion doesn't leave you anything to sell, where a DNX or a partial birth, as it's called, does. So I think that was the impetus for creating the partial birth abortion. I think this is just the next inevitable step. This type of abortion that you're talking about, which now we've even heard some things referred to as managing a problem pregnancy through
Through a stillbirth.
through a stillbirth. I think on some of the National Abortion Federation
Right.
tapes, they're even referring to that. So you manage a pregnancy through a stillbirth, and the woman never has to acknowledge she had an abortion. Matter of fact, that's what they were using. They were using it as a sales pitch. You can tell your
Right.
customer that you're not having an abortion. We're just managing your pregnancy through a stillbirth. This stillbirth abortion is, in effect, the next step after partial birth abortion, because it gives you even more tissue and a more intact fetus, a better baby to sell than does the partial birth abortion. So I know that you're sensitive to that issue as far as what your hospital is doing, whether there's any genetic, I know that you have some problems with the things that are happening as far as the genetic lab and so forth.
Yeah, I don't know what's
Right.
going on with these babies after they leave
Right.
our floor and go to the morgue, but I do know that we have a genetics department that is 5 years old. I do know that we are a teaching hospital, and I do know that we have to notify the genetics department every time we have a stillbirth or a non-viable live birth.
Well, we're going to be looking into that, and I know there's a connection somehow. We're going to find what it is. And I want to thank you for coming on the show
Thank you
and
for having
welcome
me.
you to
Thank you,
Texas, and hopefully we'll see you again. We'll be right back.
Several years ago, country singer Tammy Wynette had a hit song called Stand By Your Man. Since then, she has been often attacked and ridiculed for promoting what some describe as an outdated and unenlightened view. The irony here is that the very women who claim to have rejected Ms. Wynette's philosophy, mainly radical pro-abort feminists, now appear to be the only ones who actually live by it. Consider the case of Nabil Ghali. In 1996, authorities in Cleveland, Ohio arrested this wholesome individual after more than 70 women accused him of sexual assault. Following his trial and conviction, Ghali was sentenced to, are you ready for this? 6 months in jail. The judge then did the only thing he could to make the situation even more disgraceful. He reduced Ghali's sentence to the time he served awaiting bail and cut him loose. Now, you would think that such an outrage would immediately send the flannel-shirted stormtroopers from the National Organization for Women into the streets with beet red faces screaming at the top of their lungs. After all, that's precisely what happened when Clarence Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court, and all they had on him was an unproven allegation that he had told a dirty joke 12 years earlier. But this time, the now cows were quiet as little church mice. No marches, no demonstrations, no demands for new legislation, not even so much as a call for the judge to be thrown off the bench. But there's a twist to this little tale. You see, Nabil Ghali was more than just your garden-type pervert. He was also an abortionist. The women he attacked were his patients. Apparently, if the price of having a baby killer in town is that a few dozen women have to get raped, well, I guess for pro-aborts, that's just the cost of doing business. Of course, then there's Bill Clinton, a sexual predator who sees every woman he meets as nothing more than another potential bed partner. This guy cynically flaunts every rule so-called feminists demand that men follow, yet they remain totally loyal and completely subservient to him. And some of these people have openly admitted that they do so because he is so strongly pro-choice. What they're missing here is that men like Bill Clinton are always going to be pro-choice. Even the dumbest sexual predator can figure out that abortion allows him the maximum number of conquests with the least amount of risk. And let's not forget the very pro-abortion governor of Minnesota, former professional wrestler Jesse Ventura. In a recent interview in Playboy, he volunteered that the Navy's tailhook sexual assault scandal was nothing more than a kind of boys will be boys escapade. He followed that charming little insight by sharing his fantasy of returning in a future life as a size 38 double D bra. Now, someone once observed that in a democracy, you get the kind of government you deserve. And that certainly appears to be true. I guess when the voters choose a simple-minded professional wrestler to be their leader, they can't really be too surprised if he one day swaggers in front of the American people and brags about being a breast man. The only thing that's revealing here is that the pro-choice feminist crowd is once again silent as a tomb. Say what you like, but these old gals really know how to stand by their man.
We're back. We had a lot of calls from you guys about what's going on with the fetal tissue marketing, and I'm going to let Zentra bring you up to date.
Okay, well, Southern Illinois, where Opening Lines is located, has absolutely exploded over our revelations about what Opening Lines was doing in their own community. We have seen news coverage on the ABC affiliate, the NBC affiliate, and the CBS affiliate down there in Southern Illinois. The local newspaper, the West Frankfort Daily American, had stories about Opening Lines as the headline story 3 days in a not in a row, but on 3 separate occasions. And the results of all this coverage is that Opening Lines has essentially shut down. Miles Jones and Gayla Rose are nowhere to be seen. They have moved out of their office. In fact, they moved out in the middle of the night so that even the building owners don't know where they went or under what conditions they were leaving. It's just been a... they have vamoosed. They have.
Yeah.
They vanished into thin air.
Well, we also had groups of picketers show up down there to picket the building where they used to be located. The same thing happened in Laurel, Maryland, where Anatomic Gift Foundation's located, and they had picketers show up there, and they were trying to get those people to move out of that complex.
We had a lot of calls from the West Frankfort area, and it's no exaggeration to say these people were in shock.
They were.
Yeah.
They really were. And they were devastated to find out this was going on in their own community.
Exactly.
Well, and another thing that's been going on is we've heard that there are now investigations underway by the State Medical Board, the Attorney General's Office, and also the U.S. Postal Inspector to see if any laws have been broken in any of those places, and I'm sure they have.
And all that has been brought on by the local media coverage of Opening Lines.
And we've also done a lot of national stuff on radio.
We have radio stories, and a couple
shows.
local newspapers have done stories.
It's been an amazing scenario to see down there. You wonder, why are these people running for the hills if what they're doing is okay?
Right.
And it's legal.
They really are not bearing the heat.
The interesting thing here is we've had some coverage, some contacts by the national media, and that's been a real educational situation.
Right.
It's just reaffirmed something that we've seen in the past about how completely these people are sold out to the abortion industry.
Yeah.
We saw this same phenomenon back when we released Line 5 that we're seeing now with this thing. We had people call us from Dateline and from Fox, 2020 or ABC News, something. We had all these people calling, and these guys were just so excited about the story. They are asking all these questions.
They were trying to sell us on letting them break the story and making sure we don't bother to talk to the other guys.
Yeah, the guy from Fox is saying...
You can't trust them, you can trust us.
The guy from Fox saying, we're better, we're more conservative, don't talk to Dateline. The guy from Dateline says, we got more outlets and so forth. Please send us all this stuff. So we're sending them stuff. One guy, as you know, it was a Wednesday night, I was going to church. I even didn't go to church so I could go to the DFW airport and send them something so they'd get it the next morning.
Right.
They get the documentation, and they're no longer interested.
Right.
The documentation, the irony here is, the documentation talks them out of the story because fetal tissue marketing wasn't going to be the story to begin with. The story was going to be that here's this radical group of religious fanatics and right-wing kooks down in Texas making all these unsubstantiatable claims about somebody being out here in the fetal tissue marketing business, the second that they get the substantiation of it, they get the orders, they get the price list, they get the brochures, they see, wait, this story is true. There's no more
Therefore,
story.
nothing
Exactly.
The
else to
story is
talk about.
gone.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's such a revelation. We saw that precisely the same thing happen with Lyme 5.
They're so predictable.
They really are. But that's okay. We've had some of these people claim, well, you don't have proof. We got the order forms for the baby parts. We got the price list. We got the brochures. You've got this company that we accuse of doing this. If we were going to, if we didn't have the proof, they would have sued us within 24
yeah,
hours.
sure.
But instead, they're heading for the hills. And you're going to tell me that the American news media never runs a story with this little proof?
Oh yeah. How many times have you seen a story on just the local evening news where
It's amazing.
so they exposing something
Right.
and the people who they're exposing, well, they weren't available for comment.
Right.
Well,
It's just amazing.
that doesn't end the story for them. It's been interesting to notice kind of a dichotomy in the Christian media, where there have been some media groups that have been very eager to
Right.
present this story
Very
and have done a
bold,
very good
right.
job with it. But there are others who are just surprisingly timid. It's like they have to personally go and witness them doing the fetal tissue harvesting and witness a financial transaction before they're willing to believe it and write a story about it.
Yeah,
and
it's-
that's just simply never going to happen.
It's amazing, and we've also gotten a lot of calls from people wanting to know kind of what kind of response we've gotten from other pro-life groups.
Yeah.
And I think Linda was going to kind of bring us up to date on that.
Yeah, and that's also kind of a mixed bag. A lot of local groups have been extremely supportive, especially some of the affiliates of National Right to Life. For example, the Dayton Right to Life in Ohio has been very active.
The state Right to Life groups, the state Right to Life affiliates of National Right to Life.
Right, exactly, such as the Dayton group. They've held press conferences. They've had pickets of both opening lines, Anatomical Gift Foundation.
Now, not Dayton, but just other groups.
Right. Dr. Wilkie has been very supportive. Judy Brown of the American Life League, Phyllis Schlafly of Eagle Forum, and also Colleen Perot of Republican National Coalition for Life. The HLI has been very supportive.
Yeah, Human Life International.
Right.
And you know what's really been interesting is the information we've been getting in from pro-lifers in the field, giving us more information on universities that are doing the fetal tissue marketing and labs in their own community that they suspect are involved in the harvesting and marketing. And we're having more and more leads to follow up with that information.
Yeah, we also need to let people know, too, that one of the good things that's been an outgrowth of all the publicity we have been getting is that we've had 2 more former employees come forward. And one of these is apparently not going to pan out too well. The other one looks like it may turn into something where we really get a lot of new information. So we're really excited about that. We've already gotten some more printed documentation that we're not able to release yet, but there will be more things coming in the future. And a couple of new revelations that we've seen so far is that Planned Parenthood, according to one of these former employees of one of these facilities that harvest the parts and sell them, the wholesalers, Planned Parenthood is apparently a whole lot more mobbed up in this than what we previously thought. Our initial thought, and you and I talked about this a couple of years ago when we first started getting this, that it appeared to be kind of a thing that non-Planned Parenthood facilities were doing, but Planned Parenthood didn't seem to be that mobbed up in it. But now
it turns out they're actually
on the forefront.
heavily involved.
Right. So that's one of the things. The other thing is this deal of the mom and pop wholesalers. Because what we have found out, basically there are these 2 wholesalers, Opening Lines, which is now headed for the hills, and Anatomic Gift Foundation. We haven't identified any more wholesale companies like that. But what we have seen is, and now we're getting some documentation or some data, that there are all these kind of mom and pop wholesalers who are just going into kind of business for themselves, maybe working out of their garage or wherever.
And they're only present in maybe one abortion clinic. They probably just get researchers from their own local area to purchase the tissue and act as a go-between.
Right, and so they just buy basically the dead babies from one facility, and that's all they do. Or they're a lab. We had that one that person in Louisiana call,
and we've had several calls since then.
And said we've always wondered who these employees were that were coming up, that were going into the abortion mill, but they weren't regular employees. And they'd leave with a box, or they'd leave with an ice chest or a cooler. we never could figure out what this is about. So we suggested that they follow one of these guys the next time it happened. And incredibly, just like a day or so later, he calls back and says, we followed him. He went to this pathology lab. So it looks like either one of two things is happening there. Either that is pathology, which I don't know why they'd be so secretive about it if it's legitimate pathology, or they're selling parts. So we're going to be pursuing, to a very great degree, these mom and pop wholesalers. And I know, we've had some people call and say, well, how do I know if my local abortion mill is involved in this? And we've kind of developed some guidelines. And
there's several things that you can look for to see if your local mill is involved in fetal tissue marketing. First of all, is there regular FedEx, UPS, or airborne going to the abortion mill? Even more importantly, are they taking things out? That's
as opposed to deliveries.
Right, if they're taking things out. If there's couriers from local labs or universities, that's another thing to look for. Follow non-employees, especially if they have a cooler.
Right.
And also follow clinic employees with a box or a cooler home to see if it's picked up at their home, because some of the mills have been getting wise and they've been sending these things home with the various employees, and then FedEx, Airborne, UPS will come to their home. So we need to keep an eye on that too. Right.
They're not suspicious that it's medical waste of some sort or tissue or whatever. And we actually had on one of the tapes, one of the people, I think it was from AGF, was saying that they advised their clinics to do that, to send tissue home, because the driver may be suspicious if he comes to an abortion clinic. What's in this box?
But he's not going to think anything of it being at somebody's home.
Exactly.
Now, another neat fallout of all of our revelations that I think we want to let everyone know about is the response that this got at the last National Abortion Federation conference
absolutely.
that they just held at the end of September. Evidently, our infiltrator who was there said that there was just this eerie pall cast over the whole conference, that the people were just much more subdued than she had ever seen them before.
Right.
And then
she said it was, her word was, eerie and macabre, that they were,
Yeah, it was unlike anything she had really witnessed at these conferences before. And what more, that after the sessions and either in between sessions or when they went out for lunch or dinner afterwards, all they were talking about was what they were calling the FR thing, the fetal research thing.
And that tells me that we're really on to something, and that brings us also to something I want to address, and that's some criticism that we've taken over our claim of elective late abortions on perfectly healthy moms and perfectly healthy babies. Well,
people, they're not criticizing us for doing it, they're criticizing us for saying that it even happened.
Exactly. And so we made calls. We had somebody here at Life Dynamics pose as a woman who was 28 weeks pregnant with a perfectly healthy baby, and she was, as a mom, was perfectly healthy. She had no problems whatsoever in scheduling an abortion at 28 weeks.
Even in places where she couldn't schedule it, she could get a referral to someone where she could
get
it
they
scheduled.
Would always give her a referral. Also, if you look in the yellow pages, a lot of the places will advertise that they do abortions up to 24 weeks.
Oh, that's very common.
And just to remind everybody, this is the size of a 24-week baby.
Right.
I mean, we're not talking about a glob of tissue or anything like that. I mean, this is a 24-week baby, and babies that are 20 weeks routinely survive.
And now I think the statistics are that on babies 24 weeks, the size of that baby there, which they advertise in the yellow pages, we'll kill this baby for you with no health complications or whatever. Those babies survive well over half the time if they're allowed to be born.
Right. And
they don't survive in abortion mills, obviously.
And that's what abortionist own admissions are. Say that.
Right.
Now, and not only do we have these calls and personal verification that we've made on the late terms, but we have quotes from the abortionists at their National Abortion Federation conferences. And I know this is a quote that we had brought up a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago also. But George Tiller talking about basically he routinely is doing late term abortions between 24 and 36 weeks. Warren Hearn admits similar gestations.
Yeah, for someone to claim that these late term, and when we say late, we don't mean just second, we mean third trimester babies that are done on perfectly healthy moms and perfectly healthy babies for non-medical reasons. If they say that that's not happening, they are lying through their teeth. We've got the proof
and
of it.
It is legal in all 50 states. Because you have some regulations that may inhibit having late-term abortions, or you may have a hard time finding a doctor to do a late-term
Doesn't mean it's not legal.
third trimester abortion, does not mean that it's not legal. It is technically protected under Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton.
Well, we've
until
seen,
birth.
yeah, and today we've had Jill on here talking about it at Christ Hospital. We've seen
right.
this thing in Canada, thing in Ohio. You've got a Hearn quote there about live birth.
Yeah.
We were talking about this. We found this little quote.
Just as further verification, this is a book on reproductive ethics and the law by the feminist philosopher Joan C. Callahan. And she's talking about an interview she had with Warren Hearn, and she says, Dr. Warren Hearn has pointed out to me that a number of practitioners attempt to ensure live fetuses after late abortions so that genetic tests can be conducted on them.
Right. So anybody
says it
who
all.
believes, yeah, and that's the guy who wrote the textbook on doing abortion.
Right. He knows what's going on.
He knows what's going on. Listen, you're going to know what's going on too as we continue this process of educating you about late-term abortion and about fetal tissue marketing. As I said earlier in the program, we are just at the very beginnings of this. But again, as I've told you in previous shows, we need your support to continue. This is not inexpensive stuff that we do here, and so we do need your financial support. We need your prayer support, and we do appreciate all the nice letters and cards and phone calls that we're getting. They really do pump us up because, believe me, this can be very debilitating work, dealing with these kind of people all day, listening to the garbage that we have to listen to. But again, we continue to ask for your support, and we know that you're going to give it because this work is just too important to abandon, and we are not going to walk away.
Mark Crutcher is the most dangerous anti-abortionist in America. I can't impress upon any of you how seriously you need to take this organization.
LDI's emergence has many abortion rights supporters worried.
Life Dynamics is the scariest and nastiest anti-choice group around. Life Dynamics has become renowned among abortion rights activists as the new bad kid on the block.
I think that we cannot underestimate the determination of Life Dynamics to destroy us, and they have found an exceedingly dangerous tool.
What we have found out about Life Dynamics is they're smart. They're smart enough to come up with at least palpable arguments that make some sense.
I've got to hand it to Life Dynamics. They are on to something very disturbing, and I don't know what we do about it.
Life Dynamics, a Texas-based anti-choice organization, is leading the fight on the new frontier.
I am convinced that Life Dynamics is now the most dangerous pro-life group.
Life Dynamics tactics constitute a real threat to continued access and are seriously crippling the right of women to choose and access legal and necessary abortion services. I've been with the Feminist Women's Health Centers for many years, and then with National Abortion Federation. Watching Life Dynamics makes me realize that our Achilles heel is being struck.
It would be a mistake to underestimate Mark Crutcher and his team.
There's something about Life Dynamics that warns you to take them seriously.
These people are scary.
Well, as always, the time has flown by, and we're
Yes.
completely out of time. But I think you had just a couple of final messages you wanted to deliver.
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to say was to remember to multiply the effects of LifeTalk and show it to just as many people as you can. We've heard about LifeTalk being shown to hundreds of people in
Right.
meetings, shown it to friends. Everything helps, and we really appreciate the effort.
Right. We've had people say that every month they show it to 300 or 400 people in their church. So that's a good way to get the word out.
Yeah, get the information out
Right.
and just the message.
Right.
Another thing, we've had a lot of requests for the scripts from LifeTalk. Well, I'm sorry to say the program is completely unscripted, so we don't have anything to give you.
Wow,
Right.
I mean, people really think that this is scripted.
I guess so.
That must mean that we're doing a great job, and
Yep.
if we're doing a great job, that means that we deserve a raise, right?
That's the way it's
Let's
supposed
vote
to
on
work.
it.
Yes.
Your statement was
let's
correct.
see,
Your
all in
conclusion was
favor?
wrong.
Aye.
Yeah, right. Good try. Not going to happen, I'm afraid. Anyway, make sure that you get your envelope sent in for next month's show, unless you're obviously a yearly subscriber. If you're going to send us a donation, you can use that envelope, and we need every donation we can get. If it's $5, we appreciate it. If it's $5,000, we appreciate it. If it's $5 million, we appreciate it. So whatever you can send, we're going to put it to use in stopping the killing of these little babies and the butchering of their moms. Let's see, what else? Yeah, if you can't afford LifeTalk, make sure that you call us and let us know. If you can afford to pay for it, you need to, but if you can't, we're going to send it to you anyway, because we're not here to make money. We're here to get the word out about the barbarism that's inflicting our nation. And so don't let money hold you up. Again, it looks like we're out of time. We can hear the music in the background. Got some other things we'll have to leave until next month. Remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We will see you next month.